It's a pleasure to be here today with so many members from the Irish community and our special host, Elgin, Loane from the Irish Post, and Niall O'Dowd, sorry, from the Irish Voice of the Irish Central, all the way from New York via Ireland. Also, on my right over here, we've got Stephen Lloyd, who is the spokesperson on
Northern Irish affairs, but patron of the Irish Liberal Democrats, so it covers both sides.
And on my left over here, we've got Peter Hain, who's the MP for Neath, so the Right Honourable Peter Hain, the MP for Neath, and the ex-Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Peter's got to be away by past, so I'm going to ask him, once I've said a few words here, I'm going to ask Peter if he'll say a few words of encouragement, and then we'll move on to our guest speakers. So, once again, welcome to the House. This is the Grimond Room, and very appropriate as far as Stephen is concerned. Joe Grimond was the father, the spiritual leader of modern liberalism, so it's nice to be. We're an all-party group, and we're in an all-party venue. And the work at the back there, the beautiful work, is a tapestry by the British artist Jenny Moncur. So we've got very pleasant surroundings with St Stephen's Tower, the Big Ben out there at the window. So the All Party Group was reconstituted in 2010. I think we've got over 100 members from all political parties. We're interested in welfare issues, arts, culture, and the standing of the Irish here in Britain. We're interested in East-West relations between Ireland and Britain. And many of our members are active in the British-Irish Interparliamentary Assembly. And that's a way of developing friendship over a 20-30 year period between Irish politicians and British politicians and Assembly members, Scottish MPs and MLAs in Northern Ireland. We're interested in Northern Ireland and we're helping the peace process on the road. We're interested in the past, the impact of the Troubles upon the Irish in Britain. It was a sad period, and it's often an overlooked period with a long legacy. And we're interested in working with the Irish in Britain, working for a strong community and part of a British community, but also a global community involving the Irish all around the world. And I think we're one of the strongest and most active all-party groups in the House of Commons. We've been active on a number of issues, including the Irish tick box for the census. We've cooperated with the Irish Hammersmith Cultural Centre, and that was a great victory which was led by the local community out there. We've had a great success involving Elgin, rescuing the Irish Post when it was about to go down. We've worked with MPs from Northern Ireland, Mark Durkin and his colleagues on getting recognition for Seamus Heaney, one of the most successful EDMs of the past Parliament, signed by I think about 150 MPs commiserating the death of Seamus Heaney. We're looking at the Irish diaspora on the global markets, and I think the media and publishing enterprises the world over are learning from the growth of the internet, and that's one of the challenges and opportunities for us here today. We have a diaspora which is spread probably 70 million people all around the world. 100 years ago that would have been hard to connect with, and it was mainly done through newspapers and then more latterly to television. The rise of the internet, the rise of Twitter and Facebook allows us to immediately contact many of those 70 million people around the world. It allows us to connect the old and the young, the rich and the poor, the urban and the rural. So I think that's one of the key things that we need to be looking at here today. And Irish organisations are developing their own online capacity. The potential is there. If they're developing that out there in a community, how do they then connect with the press, with the Irish Voice, with the Irish World, with the Irish Post, with RTE? How do we connect that community from around there, the Irish community from around the world, through these media channels to connect with an even bigger audience? And also the opportunity to connect the Irish business and professional networks. And the Embassy does fantastic work on this, and I pay tribute to the new ambassador Dan Mulhall and his previous ambassadors have used the embassy to connect that that British community, Irish-British community in the embassy. How do we build upon that success? And also I think it's fitted for recognition how we connect with the diaspora around the globe, because it's also a political goal, I think, of the President, Michael D. Higgins, who courted the Irish diaspora, and myself and Martin went to see him in Camden, the Irish Centre there. So it's important to the President to connect with that Irish diaspora, and I think we can play, every one of us in this room can play a big role in doing that. I think the branding and identity of what it is to be Irish in the 21st century needs to be looked at. Is it because your grandfather was Irish, which allows you to have a passport? Is it because you feel Irish and you can tick that census box? You know, what is the issue? The view of the plastic paddies. People who want to be Irish but are looked down upon by some who are more truly Irish. How do we grapple with that? What's the issue of Irishness for immigrants coming into Ireland? How long do you have to live in Ireland to be Irish? These are all issues that I think need to be explored. And again, there's been great initiatives by the government with the gathering. Again, there's two views of the gathering, that it was great to bring all of those people down, but did we view it too commercially? And I think we really, the Irish are setting a very high standard for diaspora around the world, the potential to use our diaspora for world peace as well, because we've been through many troubled times over many centuries. What are the lessons that we've learned that we could spread to troubled areas of the world? So working here in Westminster in a cooperative, collegiate way across all political parties is our aim, and that's why we're here today. And it's great to have such an esteemed audience. And we've also now got a shadow, we're doing well here, shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, Ivan Lewis, who will be at the meal tonight as well, so it's great that you're here, Ivan. Before we move on to our guest speakers, I'm going to ask the Right Honourable Peter Hain if he will just say a few words before he goes off for a media interview.
Well, thanks very much, Chris, and Chris Ruane does a fantastic job here in Parliament. He's a Welsh MP like me, but he's also a passionate supporter of Ireland, north and south, and the whole of the island of Ireland. He's also got one of the loudest voices in the House of Commons.
Oh, heavens.
When Chris intervenes across the chamber, you can hear him speak in Dublin. So good to have you all here today. And I know that this All Party Group's played a very, very important part over the years, and no less important under Chris's leadership in making sure that the voice of the Irish community here in Britain, which we're proud to have living here, is a very important part of our culture in Britain, that its voice is heard. And I know that it played a very important part in rescuing the Irish Post, which has always had a long record of supporting peace and justice and freedom in Ireland. And it's great to see you, Elgin, linking up with Niall O'Dowd in New York. And I hope that the benefits are mutual and support both the businesses and both publications. And Niall, I seem to remember giving an interview to the Irish Voice. He's smiling, so he can remember this as well. I think it was late 2005. I'd been in the job about 6 months, which resulted in Ian Paisley calling for my resignation for Northern Ireland. All I'd done was call for a common economic strategy between the business communities, north and south, to take forward a common economic policy across Ireland for the benefits of all. Anyway, I said to Ian when I got back, what was all that about? And he said, oh, well, I had to do it. Don't take any notice of it. And I said, does that mean I don't have to take any notice of anything you say, Ian? But on that occasion, it was more a ritual response. Anyway, I do hope that this is beginnings of a much, much greater and stronger link between Britain and the Irish in Britain and the Irish in America. And just to say a brief word, the Irish-American community has been absolutely vital, both in the dark decades of holding up the flag of justice and freedom on behalf of the people of Ireland, north and south, but also more recently as well as bedding in the police, and that work continues. And it'll continue, given the long centuries of history, it'll continue for a while. So I wish you all the best. I thank both of you for working together and the job that you do, and wish the APPG all the best in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going first,
Okay.
I believe.
So Elgin Loane now is going to take the floor. So welcome to you, Elgin, the owner of the Irish Post and many other publications.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We've a heading here of Irish Diaspora Global Markets, and you know, I think I picked out the words engaged diaspora community is a story in the making. So I suppose there's a kind of three stories in my view coming together here. There's my own personal story, there's my own probably business story, and third there is the story in the making of the diaspora. Naturally I have control over my own personal story, my own business story. I can only have some influence over the diaspora story. So I'll tell you a bit about, you know, I want to be able to give you some background and my thoughts on the now and some thoughts going forward. So my own personal story was I was born in Cork, Ireland in 1973, had a classic middle class upbringing. I sat my leaving, didn't do great in it, and that's when my life started to change. I went to Birmingham in November 1992 to train to be a printer. I spent 3 years in the factories up there, and it certainly taught me a lot about life. When I'd finished in the factory, I realized I didn't want to stay being a printer all my life, so I needed to get some qualifications. So I started to study accountancy at night. I wasn't the greatest academic, so it took me about 5 or 6 years when it should have really probably taken 4. So that's the kind of personal story of how I arrived. Probably the next story was how I could go into business for myself. I came to London in 2003 and bought a small print business then. It had about 5 staff. It wasn't far from here, up in Hay Hill. It was my first experience of running a business. Naturally, in a small business, you're very close to the staff, and all the emotions and everyday things come into running that business. As your business gets bigger, you get a bit more removed, and it does get a bit easier. You know, so I had a print business. I established a business called The Colour Company, which is kind of the leading print company here in central London. Again, I was kind of growth-minded, and publishing was allied to print, so I decided to move into publishing. That was in about 2010. So I had a publishing structure in place. We published, I think, in 2010, like 15 titles or so. We had 70 or 80 employees. What I did have then, when August 2011 came, I was in a position to acquire the Irish Post when the Irish Post was put into liquidation by its owners, Thomas Crosby Holdings. How I got to know about the Irish Post was simply it came over the internet news wires, and certainly with a structure in place, it was relatively quick and easy for me to step in and acquire it. I've had the Irish Post 2 years now, and certainly I've enjoyed most of the time with it. It's certainly brought me having to spend a lot more time in places like these by essence, as opposed to Niall is more interested in, and I am interested. I'm more a businessman than always into the political and community, but I always do my best as the owner now of the Irish Post. We've taken the Irish Post a long way from when it was, you know, September 2011. It was, you know, it had a great legacy in history. I'll never forget actually going out to its offices in Hammersmith, seeing all the old, the files, the photos. You had 40 years of history of the Irish in Britain just lying in an empty office. That struck me. I always kind of wondered if that was a French newspaper in Britain, would the French government have stepped in right away and say, we're taking this over, it's part of our history. So, we got the Irish Post back on the shelves within 8 weeks. There was some great work on the Save the Irish Post campaign. The chairwoman is here, Fiona Audley. Chris Ruane here was a big champion in Parliament, and we saved the paper, which it doesn't happen in this day and age, so a lot of credit has to go to. It's not I provided the structure there. It's
on the
main, some anyway. So that was a good success story. What's happened is we've kind of the paper is naturally great. It's produced every week. We have a hard, committed team. Circulation is steady. Areas where we've been looking and we have looked into and we have been pushing the circulation. As Niall will vouch for it, that is extremely difficult in this day and age to increase your paper circulation. Where we've had notable success, when we took over, there was probably about 5,000 visitors a month to our website. At the moment, it's running about 90,000. We're still looking like that magic thing of how you monetize that, but that's quite a success there. I think the other area where we have improved is I did sit back and think about the business. And one thing I could see with the internet, I'm not great with it, but I could see that, the diaspora around the world, particularly the Irish, there would have to be some sort of link up. And I spoke to Billy Cantwell in Australia. I spoke to the Irish Echo, and I spoke to Niall himself. And I came across, like anything in life, I felt I got on very well with Niall. He's a very easygoing person, highly knowledgeable, very intelligent, does a lot, but he has that easy demeanour. He's happy. He's the personality that will let you learn from him, but doesn't speak down to you, if you know what I mean. So, like anything, that was the basics of a deal coming together. I have to say, it's I'm trying to decide whether the Irish Post or my Irish America deal are my two favourites. I'll say they're equal. I've really enjoyed, even in the 6 months we've had our business stake, I've enjoyed speaking to Niall every week. I've learned quite a bit. The other aspect I like is I like to be able to go out to New York. I like to be able to, Niall introduces you to everyone. He knows everyone out there. And it's a good story for Niall too, because, if I was just any businessman from the UK arriving in, it's a hard introduction, but if he introduces me, this is Elgin Loane, the owner of the Irish Post in London, naturally the whole story makes sense in that way. Coming back to the third story, the diaspora story, the Irish have left Ireland for as long as we care to remember. The 1840s was a great exodus to America. I think particularly 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, the heartland of the Irish Post readership, that's when they left, came to Britain, and we've seen renewed Irish exodus in the past 5 years. Australia, of course, is huge. Bob Hawke often described Australia as the most Irish place outside Ireland. For me, I think looking at it all and seeing where I am with the Irish Post and what I can do, it's a matter of trying to join up the dots in that, if I look at the domestic Irish media, you have the Independent, you have the Irish Times, you have RTE, and on a smaller scale you have the Examiner. I would like to think we could get a media organisation with the dots joined up outside of Ireland to at least act as, don't use it, as a counterbalance. And I think, because fragmented like Billy in Australia, the Irish Post here in London, and which is Irish World as well here in London, and you have Niall in America. You also have a couple of other publications. The forces coming together, if you actually get them all, would give you a relatively powerful media organisation for the Irish diaspora. That has been my thinking in that regard, and I'm sure it has been Niall's thinking. Niall is, I don't want to speak for him, but Niall has also quickly grasped that the internet's the place to be, and has set up his Irish Central, I think, in that regard as well. I'm lastly hoping more than most things is that with getting the Irish Post, I feel a real responsibility, having taken it on from Brendan. Well, I didn't take it on from Brendan McClure, but naturally he was the founder of it, created the rich legacy it has. I'm also very anxious that I pass on the Irish Post to maybe it'll be somebody else, but I want it to be here in 30 or 40 years, whether it's a website, the Irish Post, or it's a joined up global diaspora media organisation. I do feel a responsibility after saving it of making sure it's here in 30 or 40 years. And it's a kind of odd responsibility for a businessman, because my other businesses, it's standard stuff, you know. If they make cash flow, if they make a profit, well, great. You don't kind of have the same sense of responsibility. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Probably just my last thing to touch on for maybe Niall, I just have a couple of key themes what I see as for improvement to help this Irish diaspora global markets, you know. I would suggest, you know, there should be a dedicated resource in Dublin and a budget to harness the global diaspora. You know, there needs to be research done. Again, I don't mean to put it always on Dublin, but you know, there needs to be a lot of research done on where young Irish people are communicating on the websites, Facebook and all of that, and, you know, direct them to where we can be, or Niall's Irish Central. I also, you know, I think here in Britain we've had I was certainly luckier, as I look at people, you know, Britain has a rich history, especially for young aspiring business people. You can look at the Irish corporate chieftains that came here, you know, the Murphys, or nowadays Ray O'Rourke, who really have blazed a trail. And you know, I sometimes feel who and how do I identify the next generation coming through, work on that. And my final thing is, you know, as I've just said, without a doubt the diaspora media outside of Ireland have to connect. And if they do connect, they can provide a counter to just the domestic. They can be a force to show that the global Irish diaspora story is there, has to be taken note of, and fully harnessed. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Niall, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be here, and I wouldn't be here actually without the Irish Post, which is a strange story, because back in 1978 I was a young newspaper publisher in California, and I was looking to start a magazine in New York, and this is 1984 actually, sorry, I started out in California in 78, but the first person I picked up the phone to talk to about my idea for an Irish magazine, who didn't know me from a hole in the wall, was a guy called Brendan McClure here in London, who happened to run the Irish Post, of which I was a huge fan of. And Brendan, over the phone, agreed to back my very first publishing venture, my second publishing venture, which was Irish American Magazine, and subsequently the Irish Voice newspaper. So it was an amazing introduction to the Irish in Britain, because I think Brendan, through some very tough years, flew the flag. It's very easy for me in America to fly the flag, because there's a 40 million Irish American constituency, and the notion of Ireland is a very, very successful one, a very good brand name, and thing that people are deeply invested in. Whereas the Irish in Britain, particularly in the 70s and 80s, was a very, very tough identity. And I think the Irish Post flying that flag was incredibly important. It was the lifeblood of this community, in my opinion. So when the Irish Post went under, I was quite upset about that. and as Elgin will tell you, was the underbidder for the Irish Post. But I'm glad I didn't get to buy it, because I think what Elgin has done in this day and age, take a newspaper back from bankruptcy and Chapter 11, as we say in America, and to bring it back to life, to retain the readership, to get the thing going again. I've been in the office the last 2 days. There's an energy and enthusiasm. I think the community owes Elgin a tremendous debt of thanks for what he did with the paper, because without the Irish Post, to me, the Irish in Britain would find it very, very difficult to put together the kind of plans and ideas that everybody, I think, in this room shares. From my own point of view, I just want to deal with the Irish diaspora in America on three, very, very briefly, on 3 levels. There's a wave of emigration every 30 years from Ireland. I've been saying this for 30 years. The Irish government has been denying it for 30 years, but they might finally believe it now. If you go back to the 1920s, the 1950s, the 1980s, and 2010, huge numbers of people leaving Ireland. So there's a default position in Ireland. When I read the Irish Times today and it says, wonderful news, our unemployment is under 400,000. The reason your unemployment is under 400,000 is because 300,000 took the emigrant vote or the thing. And that's the reality that, unfortunately, Ireland doesn't deal enough with. They talk about it in the abstract. They don't deal with the consequences of that emigration. I have absolutely nothing against legal emigration to America or voluntary emigration to Britain. What I do have objection to is people who leave who are not prepared for immigration, the kind of people that people like Jenny here are dealing with on a daily basis in the Irish in Britain group. People that are unable to cope with the stresses of immigration. We've had 3 suicides in New York in the last 2 months of young Irish. We've had a copycat suicide in Boston, a copycat suicide in San Francisco. This is a tough issue. These are tough issues when you take people out of their natural environment. They go to another country, they find it hard to adjust. It's a much more dislocating experience than I think people in Ireland give credit for. It's not something that's very easy to do for a lot of people who voluntarily emigrate and who have a job to go to, but for the vast majority of sons and daughters of rural people in Ireland leaving Ireland, whether it's Australia, whether it's Britain, or whether it's the United States, it can be a very dislocating experience. On the political side in America, we learned very quickly that we had to reach the people in power, and I was one of 3 people that in 1990 went down to see a young Arkansas governor called Bill Clinton and began talking to him about Northern Ireland. And I was amazed to find out in my first conversation with him, because most of my conversations with American politicians about Ireland start like, well, what's your interest in Ireland? Well, my grandmother was Murphy from Cork, and my aunt and my chief of staff is married to an Irish woman. They don't really know the issue. They have a nice idea of Ireland, but they don't understand it. But talking to Bill Clinton in 1990 was amazing, because he immediately fastened on the fact that he had been in Oxford during the Irish civil rights demonstrations in Derry in 1968, and he was very, very influenced by it. And he knew and talked a lot about Northern Ireland in that meeting. And a man who was with me at that meeting was a great Irish politician, Paul O'Dwyer, whose brother had been mayor of New York. And Paul said to me after we left the meeting, if this guy ever gets to be president, the entire issue of Northern Ireland is going to change. And that was really tremendously prophetic words, because it did change when Bill Clinton became president. And the Irish community was very lucky in that we reached into Bill Clinton early, and we had an influence on him that was quite considerable. And through the time of his first term in office, when we went to him with ideas about Ireland, he was extremely open to them. Most notably, a very difficult one of a visa for Gerry Adams for America, which he gave to Gerry Adams against the advice of the State Department, the FBI, the CIA, every major politician practically. But it was an education for us on how to influence American politics, that you have to get in early, you also have to do fundraising, and you have to be very, very active. American politics works on the notion that you have to basically knock on doors and knock very hard. Not a lot of Americans care about political issues, unfortunately. Not since the Vietnam War have we had a huge issue that split America down the middle. So the people who are most active, like you see with the Tea Party, or the Irish lobby, or the Israeli lobby, are the people who get heard, and heard a lot. So when we basically succeeded in influencing Bill Clinton, we were ending a 200-year system whereby the American government never really intervened in Northern Ireland. They pretended they did, but they never actually did. But I've often said that instead of sending troops, America sent George Mitchell. And we all know the effect that George Mitchell had on peace in Northern Ireland. And I think that's the example for America much more. The soft power of America is much more powerful in so many ways, which is where Irish America comes in. So it was interesting when Hillary became Secretary of State, one of the first conversations we had with her was she was looking at the idea of what the Irish Americans achieved in helping bring peace to Northern Ireland. And she said to us specifically, there were 3 of us in the meeting with her, she said, I want you to do this and I want you to go and talk to Turkish Americans, Iranian Americans, Pakistani Americans, Indian Americans. Talk to them about the power of a diaspora. Talk to them about the power of what they could achieve when they look back at their own country and the issues that they have. And it was a very interesting exercise for us to do that, because it brought this whole idea of diaspora into a whole different level, that we were now being viewed as one of the more successful ones, that we could have major influence on policy. And it's something that we have continued to do. I mean, we're looking at the presidential election 2016 very seriously. We look at 4 candidates in particular. We raised $2 million for Hillary Clinton the last time. That's how you get her attention. We'll probably raise the same amount for her this time. We're also looking at Martin O'Malley, the Governor of Maryland, great Irish American, very interested in his heritage. We're looking at Paul Ryan on the Republican side. We haven't spent enough time with Republicans, but Paul Ryan has certainly indicated to us that he's very, very interested in his heritage. And we're looking at Vice President Joe Biden. I had the pleasure of introducing Joe Biden to Elgin in New York in March when we had him at one of our events. Joe Biden is another guy who feels very strongly about his Irish heritage. So the influence and the power is there in America now. It took a long, long time to put it together, and it took a tremendous amount of effort. And I know that the same situation doesn't pertain in Britain, but even meeting a man like Martin and seeing the enthusiasm and the goodwill. Chris, sorry. Martin Ray is a friend of mine. Meeting a man like Chris and seeing the enthusiasm and the commitment that he has is enormously energizing for me to go back to America and to report that yes, things are very good over here. And I think that political influence, the word diaspora, I wrote about it in the Irish Times about 20 years ago. I talked about the Irish diaspora, and Mary Robinson talked about it. And there was a lot of letters in the paper saying, what is a diaspora? We don't understand it. We have no idea what you're talking about. And yet when I come to London now, I can hear it talked about at great length and with great skill by people like Chris and the other politicians who are here. And it's an example of what's happening. I'll give you an example. There's a $50 million International School of Diplomacy opening at the University of Notre Dame, which will focus a lot on the issue of diasporas and how diasporas can affect major issues worldwide. So I think the Irish are at the forefront of all that. We've proven how successful we can be. The other area we're successful in America is the area of investment in Ireland and helping the Irish economy. And I'll just give you 3 examples of that. One is Chuck Feeney, an Irish American who we reached out to many years ago, who has invested about $1.6 billion in Irish education. The single biggest contributor to Irish education outside of the government there. Again, a guy who we got involved, started with a trip he made to Shannon, met the guy there who ran the duty-free shops, which he was involved in himself, and he just became involved in Ireland. A guy called Don Keogh, who was the first to bring the major multinational Coca-Cola to Ireland, created a whole Irish group around himself at Notre Dame. People like Warren Buffett, who he's brought to Ireland, huge investors. Again, a guy who, because we went into him and said, are you interested in your Irish heritage? And he responded very positively. There was 2,500 people working in Leitrim because of a guy called Cawley, who decided that he'd site the MBNA factory there because his mother was from there. It's stuff like that that you just can't make up. That is actually a very powerful part of our diaspora. And if you don't have the tools for that diaspora, I think that the critical thing for us is we have battles ahead of us in America. We have a huge battle with immigration. We have 50,000 undocumented Irish there. We're fighting that battle the same way we fight all our battles now, which is we're getting very political. And we're very fortunate that in the last 6 weeks, we have a new ambassador in Washington who's making a huge difference in terms of reaching into politicians very aggressively to put the case of the Irish. But when I come to London, I'm always energized by the fact that, you know, despite, I mean, look, it was very easy for us in America. We were pushing an open door with most people. But in spite of everything here, the bad years, the IRA bombings, all the stuff that went on that made it very tough for people to be Irish, I see a re-energized and a recreated, particularly around the Irish Post, community in a meeting like this and the kind of ideas that I hear expressed here. I just want to say to you guys, you're doing exactly the right thing. It's very important. It's very important for your children, it's very important for Ireland, it's very important for the future of the Irish diaspora. My last point is, as Elgin has talked about quite elegantly, the notion of the internet. The internet and the Irish abroad are made for each other. Since we started Irish Central in 2009, we now reach about 1.8 million people a month who come in, and it's much easier because I can't ship my newspaper to St. Louis because it's 2,000 miles away and it's too expensive. But the guy in St. Louis can come on in the morning and click Irish Central and get the access to the news and the information. I would appeal to all diaspora groups, think internet, think what you're doing on the web, think of all the ways that you can reach out and impact people. It's so much easier now than it's ever been. And I think when you have the leadership of the Irish Post, the leadership of people like Chris, that this is going to make a profound difference in the future. And the way I think about it now is when I look back, many years ago I went to a meeting in the State Department about Northern Ireland, and the guy took from his desk all the clippings from the Daily Telegraph and said, this is what we read here. But they don't read the Daily Telegraph anymore in the State Department, fortunately. I think they probably read Irish Central and the Irish Post. So that's success as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.